We'd quit our jobs and we'd head to Mexico without a name for our tequila brands. One of the things we did was quit our jobs probably earlier than we needed to. So there was a good 18 months between quitting our jobs and actually selling our first bottle. There is a little voice inside of you that tells you when something's right or something's wrong, but you do sometimes lose that at times. So we had no drinks background. We didn't know how to export a product out of Mexico. Then a month before we launched, they increased it to 390 stores.
Tom, how are you?
Yeah, good, mate. How are you?
I'm very well. How's your week going?
Yeah, very good, very good. It feels like spring's in the air.
It does.
Nice cycle over here.
Time for a tequila or two, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Tom, thanks so much for coming down. You are the founder of El Rayo.
Indeed.
Which I'm going to try and keep on saying correctly. And we were talking about this off camera, how many people may mispronounce it. So I'm going to try my best. But
You did well there.
Thanks. We're going to talk a lot about the tequila space and what you guys have done with the brand. But before all that, you had a life before being a cool drinks founder that you are now are, living in Dulwich.
I don't think I'm a cool drink.
But before you even started your brand, what were you doing?
I was actually an insurance broker working in the city, which is wildly different to the world of
Very wild.
Yeah, I started when I moved to London. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. I did a few months working for a brand consultancy initially. Didn't enjoy that as much as I thought I would. And then, got into the corporate world, I guess, and did that for 2.5 years. I think I look back on it with a lot of fond memories. I think it taught me a lot of useful lessons. It was very commercial as a role. It was very sort of trade orientated. So going out and making deals. It set me up. I'd never studied economics or business or anything like that. So I think it gave me some grounding in the sort of business world. Yeah.
Did you sort of just fall into it because you didn't know where else you wanted to go at the time? Was that one of the reasons?
Yeah, a little bit. My brother does it as well, and I'd spoken to him about it, and he sort of lives a good life with it. But I think it was never what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I think when you start in an industry, you do sort of look up to the people above you and where you think you can get to. And I just thought that if I'm totally honest with you, I was staring out the window, picturing a better life, which happened to mean going to Mexico.
So you quit and went to Mexico?
Wasn't quite as bold as that.
It sounds more dramatic though, so that's where I like to picture it.
Yeah. I think one of the things we did was quit our jobs probably earlier than we needed to. So there was a good 18 months between quitting our jobs and actually selling our first bottle, which is a relatively challenging time.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's such a brave decision. It's such a difficult decision for people to make. And I think it helped having somebody else making the same decision as well with my business partner, Jack. But I think there does come a time where you do need to focus on the business solely if you can. And that's what we did.
We'll get into kind of why tequila and all that stuff in a second. But you obviously have a co-founder, Jack. Do you feel like you had to do it with someone else at those very early stages? Were you always looking for a partner to do it with?
Yes, I think I have a huge amount of respect for people who do it on their own. I think it can be an incredibly lonely place at times, even when there's two of you. So, yeah, I have massive respect for that. But for me, I need that interaction with somebody else and to bounce ideas off. Me and Jack have known each other since we were sort of 3-4 years old.
Since you were 3?
Yeah.
How did you first meet?
So we're thick as thieves. We were actually first met at school in Lincolnshire. Jack walked into the classroom with a broken leg. That was my first memory of him.
Thought, right, I'm going to build a business with him.
It didn't think that right at the time. But it's turned out that way.
Yeah. And why did you decide to actually build a business with him? Was it just because you were so close?
Yeah, it was. I think we'd been having a lot of conversations around different business ideas that we had. I think I'm sure we'll get into the story of setting up the brand, but we both always had quite an entrepreneurial itch that we wanted to scratch, and I think we complement each other quite well. And given the friendship and relationship that we've got, there's a level of trust immediately that probably takes co-founders years to build up that we just sort of had from day one.
Yeah.
That does obviously come with its challenges at the same time. But yeah, it just always made sense. And I think to answer the sort of original question, I've always sort of needed to have somebody to be able to interact with and bounce ideas off. And I think, it's held us in good stead.
I feel like in the drinks space, particularly within the UK, there's quite a lot of co-founders. Like it's kind of a bit of a trend. Like some of the brands that both me and you know, and others that have been on this podcast, like there are a lot of co-founders in that space. Do you think there's a trend there as opposed to other industries, or do you just think it happens to work out like that?
I don't know. It probably is a trend because you're right. There are a lot of them. I think there's obviously a lot that you need to bring to the table as a founder on your own, and there's a lot of different skill sets that are required. So I think if you have a good enough relationship with somebody where you think you can start a business with them, then it makes a lot of sense if you can complement each other. But yeah, I think there is probably a bit of a trend going on, but it seems to be that some of the most successful brands that we see actually are co-founder relationships.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so obviously you guys quit. Did you quit at the same time?
We did, yeah. We quit on the
same day. Yeah. Really? Nice. Was that kind of like self-encouragement from both of you a little bit? Were you like, if we're going to do, because I think there's a one thing if we take it outside of like founders, but also when people are like unhappy in their jobs or they want to take that chance, whatever, it feels like everyone looks at it as like, if I don't just quit and throw myself in it, I'm never going to do it type thing. Did that apply to you guys?
I think it does. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think it's one of many different reasons why it's good to have somebody next to you whilst you're doing it. I think there comes a time where you do just need to be focusing on it 100%. I think you never know what the next year, 2 years, 5 years is going to look like.
Yeah.
I think it would be a slightly different story now with a mortgage and a wife and a lot more life responsibilities than I had when I was 25. So
you listed those things well in terms of putting the wife out.
And I think, there's just a lot of naivety that happens when you're in that moment, which I think ultimately is quite a good thing, because I think there's a lot that actually comes with that decision that you make that you don't know about. That's probably better that you don't know about the time that you made the decision. I
think I was speaking about this the other day with someone about the kind of like early days of just being like a naive founder. Like they are just the best days because you can't even begin to imagine some of the issues you might be having in the future. And that kind of like naive optimism in some ways is, I think, where a lot of the early days are the most enjoyable, because you're kind of going into it the full focus of like, nothing's going to go wrong. We'll get Waitrose, we'll get Sainsbury's, and we'll be a fine bit, be a great brand, and we'll sell to someone special. But I think those early days are really kind of what gives you the, I guess, confidence to really go into it. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. I think those early days are about discovery. There's so much that you're discovering. You've got your eyes wide open. It's an extremely exciting time. You're setting something up. You're building something, essentially. So yeah, I do definitely agree.
So 5 years, you guys have been around for
nearly 5 years, not quite 5 years. 5 years in May.
What's the kind of one thing you would, looking back to where you are now versus those early days, is there something that you would really give yourself as advice looking back on those 5 years?
I think always trusting your instincts. I think there is a little voice inside of you that tells you when something's right or something's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's easy to it's not easy, but you do sometimes lose that at times. So I think there's a reason why you set this business up, or why you and Jack set this business up.
Yeah.
You're the only two people that could have done it in the way that you've done it.
Yeah.
So just remembering to listen to that, I guess, would probably be one of many things I should probably tell myself.
So why Tequila? Why did you guys actually start the Tequila brand?
So in many ways, I've got my brother to thank, which is really annoying, and he reminds you of frequently. So he does a lot of business out of Mexico and bought me back a bottle of Siete Leguas Añejo tequila. At the time, I was drinking tequila like most people were drinking tequila generally. Someone forcing me to do it.
Mm-hmm. So is that how mostly it's consumed, by the way? Just generally, like
it's changed massively now, but I'm talking 2017,
right?
And yeah, the way in which it's consumed has changed massively in the last 5 years. But there was still quite a big stigma attached to it back then, I guess. So yeah, he introduced us to it, gave it to me as a gift, and just when I tried it, it just completely blew me away. Me and Jack tried it one Thursday night after a couple of beers in Peckham, and it just completely blew us away. I think the level of quality associated with an aged tequila, I just never really associated that. So we did what two guys interested in a new drink would do. We went out and started drinking more of it, speaking to bartenders about it, understanding what brands were out there. And I think at that stage, we're still not thinking of setting up a tequila brand. We're just two guys interested in something new. And we're 25. We're craft drinkers, for want of a better phrase, because that's been overused, I think. But yeah, we're exactly the sort of consumer that the tequila category should be screaming at. And what we came across was just extremely underwhelming from a consumer perspective.
Yeah.
And that was on a brand level, but also on a serve level. I think the biggest opportunity we saw initially was a brand opportunity. We came across very similar brands singing the same song about Mexico, generally quite traditional, quite stereotypical. Wasn't a very fair reflection on what Mexico actually is as a country today, we felt. So we thought there was a big opportunity to do something more modern, more fresh, and engage with a younger consumer in a slightly different way to what traditional tequila brands were doing. And then from a serve perspective, there wasn't really a way to enjoy tequila in the sorts of environments where we would generally drink. Like, we don't go to the top cocktail bars or the 5-star hotels all the time. Like, I will go to my local pub that I like, or crucially, I'll have people over for dinner. I think that at-home drinking occasion was really holding the tequila category back. Like, no one really understood back then how to drink tequila at home. You either had a shot before you went out, or one of your friends knew how to make cocktails. When they came around, you might have a cocktail.
Yeah.
But
why do you think that it was? Sorry, like, you know, with like vodkas and gins, is it just because more people latched onto them sooner? Do you know what I mean? Because tequila's been in the UK for many years now, right?
I think where it traditionally had a very much a party reputation,
right?
So it probably doesn't make sense in that sort of slightly slower drinking occasion that you have on your own or with your partner at home.
Yeah.
And I think there wasn't really simple, easy way to drink and understand it. And we pushed tequila and tonic, and I think that highball serves, like gin and vodka, obviously have it. A lot of categories do now. I think that is a really easy way for consumers to understand it and drink it at home.
Yeah.
So that's been a big part of it, I think.
And for you guys, did you see that there was an opportunity as well to kind of build community around the brand? I guess that's one thing with a new education, a new offering in that market. Was that a focus?
Yes, definitely. I think in the early days, the business was very e-com focused, and it really felt that social and e-com was at a moment where a brand could really, really launch and build a community online. So yeah, over the first 2 years, we built up over 50,000 across social and email. And I think that online focus and success is a big part of why we've been successful actually offline. And there's been a pull offline since.
How did you build that community? Was there a strategy to it, or was it, let's make people aware of us, let's build great content? Was there any thought behind that? Yeah,
they're content platforms, so you have to have good content. I think a lot of partnerships and collaborations, so partnering with like-minded brands. We do limited edition artist collaborations. I think very early on, we're quite clear on who our consumer is, and that they were very design-minded and creative, and making sure that we doubled down in that space, I think, was part of the success.
Amazing. Where does the name come from?
El Rayo means the lightning,
right,
in Spanish. So,
how long did it take you to find this name, first of all, actually?
A long time, yeah.
Because you were saying off camera you were nameless for quite a period of time in those like 18 months of discovery, right?
We were nameless. We'd quit our jobs and we'd head to Mexico without a name for our tequila brand, which is rash looking back on it.
Was there any names that got close to before you landed on?
Jack actually has a notebook they had from right in the early days, and there are some names in there. I don't think I'm going to name anything right now. But yeah, there were some shockers in there, I'm not going to lie. We were actually speaking with Mario, who's the artist who we collaborated with to design the brand.
Yeah.
And we were having a few beers with him one night in Mexico when we were with him. And he told us this sort of origin story of tequila, this myth of how it came to be, which is a campesino, which is a local farmer, woke up in the middle of the night and a lightning storm was happening. So he went over to the window and saw that one of his plants was on fire in the distance. So he left his house in the middle of the night, followed the burning glow in the distance, arrived at the plant, and the fire had gone out, but the plant was charred and there was this golden nectar being secreted from it. And that was allegedly the first time they realized that if you cook the agave plant, there was this potential within it. And I think we had always been quite careful that we were trying to tell the tequila category that there's a new sort of contemporary modern way of doing things when it's such a cultural icon and a big heritage product. So it was an interesting way for us to present the story of the origins of tequila, but do it with a contemporary Mexican artisan in a more modern and colourful way.
Yeah. And that's a big part of the brand, right? I mean, that's what you've already spoken about a little bit, about how you guys try and stand out, this idea of bringing the art into the brand. Why did you want to do it that way?
Because if you've been to Mexico, it just makes so much sense. Like, there's art and design on every single street corner, and there's this incredible undercurrent of creativity. It's not just in art. If you think culturally, Mexican culture has actually been at the forefront of a lot of what's great about global culture recently. The food scene, particularly if you look in London, Mexican film. So I think it just felt that within the category, there wasn't enough being done to talk about this side of Mexico versus the sort of sombrero cactus side that generally gets talked about. Yeah.
Did you find that it was quite a journey to discover the brand and the brand identity? Because I personally love it. I think it's great. And like your social content, it's all very well connected and aligned. And you do I've never been to Mexico, but I've got that, feeling of Mexico within everything, which is great. And obviously the name as well. But in that discovery process, were you trying to focus on one thing? Were you worried about it being standing out on the shelf or anything like that? Or were you just going, we want to create something that looks really authentic?
I think you're considering a lot of different things. I think the main thing to note is that it took us a long time.
Yeah.
To create the label, it took us 9 months.
Really?
Loads of iterations. I can show you some of the early ones, like actually how we've developed into the label that we've got, and you wouldn't believe it. And crucially, we did it our way. We went to Mexico. We partnered with a really small agency led by an artist in Guadalajara. It's probably not the absolute template of how to set up a spirits brand.
Yeah.
We spoke to agencies in London, and we just didn't feel like it was going to do what we wanted justice. So working on WhatsApp with Mario, generally he's 6 hours behind us.
Yeah.
It was a slightly different process, and it was a longer process, but I think what we've got is something that is different and stands out.
No, it's amazing. And I think that, has that brand continued to, like the identity, have you continued to think about evolving it, or are you kind of wanting to stay with what you had originally?
I think from an aesthetic perspective, stick to what we have originally. I think it's vibrant, it's colourful, it speaks to what we see as Mexico today. I think the challenge we've got as a brand at the moment, if I'm honest with you, is translating this incredible Mexican dream world that you see online and on our website and on Instagram. How does that translate into an activation in a bar or how we show up at an event? And so translating some of the online aesthetic offline and making sure that you're consistent and true to what that sort of visual of the brand is online.
Why is that so challenging for you?
I think it's just difficult. I think it's just a difficult thing to do. It's just translating something that is in a very different environment, and still, when you're trying to do it at the moment on a larger scale, making sure that you have the cues that are going to give you the consistency that mean that every time you do an activation, someone needs to look at it for a second and realize that it's El Rayo. And I think you get that with some of what we do online, and we're starting to understand that offline. But it's just a challenge, I guess.
No, for sure. I mean, it makes total sense to me. Those early days, sort of staying on that a little bit of discovering the brand and getting the identity and being in Mexico and finding the name and all that sort of stuff. What was your fondest memory of those days?
Well, we had a very good trip to Mexico, 2 weeks, visiting 10 different distilleries, which I'm not going to lie, was quite fun.
Yeah, 10 different distilleries.
Yeah, 10 different distilleries. So we partnered with Mario on the sort of design side of things, and a guy called Oscar Garcia, who's a maestro tequilero, which is essentially a master of wine, but for tequila. And so he was really instrumental at the beginning in terms of helping us choose a distillery partner, all the recipe and liquid development. So I think those early days, the discovery days when we were in Mexico, we spent a few months with Mario developing the brand. We were finding what distillery we wanted to work with. We were going through different recipes. I go back, it's like you feel like you're really building something, and those are the sort of foundations and the building blocks, and that's a really exciting time for anyone.
For sure. Were there many challenges in the early days?
Yeah, lots of challenges. I mean, the biggest skill that any founder's got, particularly in the early days, is problem solving. You essentially every single day you're solving problems.
Yeah.
So we had no drinks background. We didn't know how to export a product out of Mexico. One day we've just got to research how do you export a product out of Mexico, those sorts of things. And I think, to be honest with you, it was relatively challenging that we quit our jobs and 18 months later we're selling our first bottle. I think if I didn't have somebody next to me that I was doing it with, that would have been a pretty lonely time, and it would have been difficult to get through that. And everything happened slower than you think. We quit our jobs in January, thought we'd be selling our first bottle in June, and it turns out that it was 12 months later.
Why was that?
There was just a lot of regulation in terms of setting up a tequila brand in Mexico.
Right.
So there's a company called the CRT, which essentially regulate the tequila industry, and certain things like you have to get your label design.
Are they in Mexico?
Yeah, they're based in Mexico. So they're essentially a subsidiary of the Mexican government.
Oh, right. Wow.
But they really regulate it. So the design of the label needs to be approved by them. The word tequila needs to be a certain size. You need to have a contract drawn up with your distillery. You need to be trademarked. All of these things that just naturally take a bit of time. I think in hindsight, it was a good thing. Like, it enabled us to understand the brand better, understand how we'd launch the brand better. But when you're in the thick of it, and you've quit your job and you don't have anything to show for it, it can feel, like a challenge.
I mean, an extra 12 months on your timeline must have been pretty intense. Were there moments where you think it wasn't going to quite work out?
Yeah, definitely. You always have those moments at the start.
Yeah.
I think until you've launched and you've sold your first bottle, there's a constant fear that it might not work out. And I think, I'll go back to it. I think having somebody that you're working with alongside you in those moments is really invaluable.
So selling your first bottle.
Let's grab a bit of water.
Of course. I imagine selling your first bottle was one of the most exciting moments for both you and Jack, particularly after a 18-month wait. What was that like? And who was it to?
It was to Master of Malt, who will always have a special place in my heart. It was obviously awesome. They actually only took 2 cases to begin with, and the amount of friends and family that we'd been telling this about for 18 months, we told them that was a little bit light. So they didn't believe us, so they ordered 2 cases. That sold out within about an hour. Then they ordered 6 cases. That sold out within about an hour. Then they ordered 10 cases. So yeah, Master of Malt were the first. And in the early days, it's very much door to doors. The rawest selling job you could possibly have. You're the salesman. You're also the wholesaler. I remember I used to pack a boot full of tequila and go and do single bottle drops around London to different restaurants and bars that we'd sold into right at the start when we didn't have any wholesale distribution yet.
Really? But did you enjoy that?
You do, yeah. It's like, that's proper hustle mode. Like, you're doing everything.
In the car, filled with tequila, just knocking on doors.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's tough. Like, you leave home at 9 a.m, you get back at 9 p.m.
Yeah.
And you've had a long day, and generally you've had a lot of no's or doors slammed in your face. But yeah, those are the days that really make you, I guess.
Yeah.
That sort of like hustle should always stay with you as a founder, I think.
Why do you think that? Because there's probably there might be some people listening right now, right, that are trying to build a brand in the drink space or in some space. And I think the idea of like knocking on doors, I feel like now in this generation, like, isn't a thing in terms of like, we'll send out a load of emails or whatever it might be, or I'll drop them a message on LinkedIn. But actually going and knocking on the door, I feel it's one of the most important things to be doing for any brand in your space and a couple of other spaces as well. I mean, it sounds like you're probably going to agree with that, but do you think that's a key fundamental thing to understand why they said no?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. That's almost more important sometimes. Yeah. And being at the coalface is where you get your best learnings, whether that's selling or sampling at events. Some of the, like, we have a line that we're turning tequila into our first drink of the night, not the last.
Yeah.
And we were at Blenheim Palace Christmas Market, which is probably not the most glamorous event we've ever done. And I just said it to somebody. I was just like, we're just, it's kind of like a gin and tonic. We're kind of trying to make tequila the first drink of the night, not the last. And the lady was like, that's a really nice line. And then we're like, actually, yeah, it is. So all those little things that you pick up on are absolutely invaluable. And I think, going back to your original question, from the sales perspective, sometimes understanding why someone said no is the best learning that you can have, because you understand what is it something that you need to improve, or whatever it may be.
Do you find sometimes in the earlier stages, particularly with a drinks brand, and maybe because of the space you're going into, which I think is one of the smaller markets because it's growing so much at the moment, back when you started, do you think it's hard to listen to all of the feedback at once? Did you ever get that where, you know, if you're at a Christmas fair or you're going to see a load of restaurants in that one day and 50% of them loved it, 50% that hated it, and the ones that hated it didn't like it. The ones
also 50%.
Yeah, sorry, mate. The ones that didn't like it, like all the feedback's different, and then you kind of like go back and you're like, who should I listen to? Do you know what I mean? Like, it must be quite overwhelming early doors to work out, actually, is there a product market fit here?
It is. I think you pick patterns out of what you're understanding from people, and it can be as top line as, is tequila and tonic a drink that people are enjoying? And you keep doing things until you at a slightly bigger scale until you feel like it's not working or something needs to be developed. But yeah, I think at the start you need to have a lot of conviction in what you're doing and the vision that you have for the business and for the brand, and in some ways you're trying to take people along with you. I don't think that many people at Berlin Palace Christmas Market would have thought of pairing tequila with tonic before. So there is an element of your sort of trying to change people's opinions yourself. So like have the conviction in what you're doing.
Yeah. And I guess this is sort of 2018, 2019, right? This sort of time?
So this is 2019, basically.
Nice. And then obviously COVID hits.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, I'd be lying if I didn't say that it was really good for our business, which feels like a bad thing to say because a lot of the hospitality industry was on its knees. But I think our initial, which we've not really talked about yet, but our initial play for the business was very e-com focused. We wanted to build a community online, become the best-selling tequila brand on Amazon, attract people to our website. And actually what we were doing offline pre-COVID was very much low volume brand building. So getting yourself a Selfridges listing, John Lewis listing, Liberty.
Is that the route that a lot of people go? Is it like a lot of brands seem to be like, we need to do those fundamentals a little bit?
I think so. I think for us it was more about, we had some data on the community that we built online, and we were trying to translate that into the offline world, and where else can we show up in their life.
Understood.
But yeah, in terms of like we were an e-com focused tequila brand trying to get people to drink tequila at home. People being stuck at home with a bit more money to spend, and obviously drinking a bit more was not going to be a bad thing for us. I think so we rode some significant coattails, and I think we became the best selling tequila brand on Amazon, which was huge. And I don't think I'll ever be able to qualify it, but that success at the start, essentially putting flags down in that many people's homes, I think has been a big part of
how did that happen?
Future success. I think initially, I don't really know, to be honest with you, but I think initially we understood what we were doing on the platform. Before COVID, if I'm honest with you, not that many brands were treating Amazon media spend with any sort of thought. So we had probably a bit of a head start. I think it's a very visual bottle. I think that's helped us online. And I think that it was a category that consumers were starting to look at. And we had a bit of money to spend on media, and everything sort of came together at once.
And so in terms of the focus on like D2C through COVID, particularly like 2020, 21, was the brand just growing sort of month on month consistently?
Yes. Yeah.
And how are you guys kind of feeding that? Was there a big shift? Obviously everything else shut down, right? And your team was still quite small at that point.
Yes.
So was it literally like all focus online, build community, drive sale through the all online channels? Yeah,
exactly. I think we were fortunate. 5% of our revenue was in the on-trade before COVID. So we're not losing a huge amount of our business overnight, as there are a lot of brands out there that were.
Yeah.
So it was a case of doubling down on what we were already doing, and making sure that we had the right media strategy and promotional strategy to make the most of how focused everyone was online in COVID times.
Yeah,
I mean, it has its challenges as well. We've for 2 years weren't able to exist offline, so we weren't able to do any events, weren't able to be in the on-trade. It's been a strange time as a business, because over 4 years we've sort of done a very online focused couple of years, gathered lots of learnings, built a great community, and then at the beginning of 2022 made quite sort of deliberate business pivot offline.
Why was that?
I think we saw what was happening in the world. Like, people were going out and enjoying like real life experiences. I think we were under no illusions that as a tequila brand we needed to exist in traditional distribution, so in on-trade and in grocery, and scaling a £35 bottle of tequila online with all the challenges that you have logistically just wasn't going to be feasible for us long term. So yeah, a combination of factors, I guess.
Did you notice through kind of like 2020, 21, 22, like the trend in obviously massive spikes in online and then that really tailing off? Did you see that happening in real time?
Yeah, definitely.
What was was there a moment for you guys internally where you were like, this is almost going down the pan from like we need to pivot, otherwise we're not going to survive? If that makes sense?
I think it became very obvious very quickly that as soon as people were able to not be stuck inside, they were going to be outside, which sounds like an obvious thing to say.
Yeah.
So, and you saw sort of as lockdowns eased, sale, like it fluctuated massively with sales. So I think there was an element of, which we're probably not the only business that rode some significant D2C coattails over COVID and then realised that they needed to have an omni-channel business to be able to de-risk the business as much as possible.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably a big part of it.
And for you and Jack, obviously you guys have never had an online business before, so you've experienced that. You've also had proportions of a kind of offline business, if you will, in some way. But at that moment, what was the plan of attack? Was it, right, we need to go get supermarket listings, we need to work on the on-trade? What was the thought process?
Yeah, I think basically exactly that. So yeah, on-trade wise, I think we work with a great sales agency called Nightcap Brands. So we got them on boards, and they have loads of drinks experience. I think that's one of the things with the on-trade, I would say, is it is important to have the experience and to understand how to make it work and who are the right people to have conversations with and all that those sorts of things. So they've been a huge part of the success that we've had in the on-trade. And it's great, like their team has grown. Like, it's great to see them going on a really nice trajectory and being a big part of that. And then grocery wise, I think, yeah, it was sort of sending out the initial introductory emails, expecting 3 years of no replies, and got one pretty immediately from Sainsbury's, which was obviously great.
Really early days. Yeah,
so I think we outreached to them in February 22 and we launched on shelf in April 24, which is 14 months, which in the grand scheme of brands trying to win grocery listings, I think is rapid.
Yeah. Why is that? I mean, I've had a few conversations on this podcast already and outside of it as well around kind of how to work with grocery listings and the effort that goes in. And everyone seems to say, you email, you try and get in front of them until all of a sudden one day the stars align. Why is that? Is it just because of the pure demand going into those buyers?
I think so, yeah. I think with Sainsbury's, we were lucky that the buyer, Abby, was a big fan of the brand over COVID. So the first thing that she said to us when we had the first conversation with her was like, absolutely love your brand, guys. Me and my mum are drinking tequila and tonics all the way through lockdown.
So the online impact is feeding into that.
Had definitely had an impact on that specific conversation.
Yeah.
And she was like, look, I love the brand, but we've never listed a tequila over 30 quid before, so I need to go and see if I can make it work. So
never at all?
No, so we were the first tequila brand they'd listed over 30 quid. They had one at sort of mid-20s price range.
Right.
So I think her love of the brand, coupled with where the tequila category was going from a premiumization perspective, and the fact that they probably had the space in their range where they needed to grow into, all came together at a fortunate time for us. But I would say it was a luck. I wouldn't say it's lucky, but it was very timing orientated. I think with other grocers, we've had 0 replies for 4 years, or we've had to go in and do a trial of 2 stores and then launching into more stores this year, and it's slightly slower burn. So I don't think anyone out there's got the sort of magic answer of how to win a listing. I think for us, we were quite clear in terms of what we were adding in terms of value to Sainsbury's, and I think that's probably the most important message, is you've got to convince these buyers that you're adding value to what they've already got.
Right. Not just saying we're a great product and it tastes great. It's got to be more than that.
It needs to be a bit more than that, I think. Yeah. So for us, the golden metric that we live by is how many people are we drawing in from outside the tequila category. We're more interested in that than necessarily people who already drink tequila.
So people who've never really tried it or not huge drinkers, bringing them in through your product to Sainsbury's.
Exactly, yeah. So how we proved that to Sainsbury's in the first place is we showed them our Amazon and D2C numbers, and then we had a really simple one question survey on Amazon and D2C over COVID, which was, have you ever bought a bottle of tequila before? And across Amazon and D2C, that was tracking at 50% of people saying no. So
you're the first experience they have
of tequila.
Wow.
So taking that to Sainsbury's and saying, look, we're building a community of people who wouldn't necessarily normally drink tequila, and we're attracting them through the brand and through the serve. We're also the best-selling tequila brand on Amazon, so we're doing it at the sort of scale that interests you. And that sort of narrative is probably a bit more
super attractive
than look at, like, we've got a really nice story to tell. Like, obviously you want to say all of those things as well.
But I guess you're feeding into actually how, because one thing I imagine, and I've never worked directly with a buyer myself, but I imagine with the buyer, it's an independent, they've got targets, responsibilities, things that they've got to do. So if you can help them in their role, not just helping Sainsbury's, that's a massive thing for them because they're bringing something in.
100%. Ultimately, they're going to have a conversation with somebody in Sainsbury's as to why this product should get listed. So you just need to be giving them as many reasons as possible for that conversation to go well.
For sure. How did the Sainsbury's relationship start? Was it a couple of stores?
Well, actually, so we launched... So we had that initial conversation with Abby, and she said, look, let me go away and do some work and see if I can make this happen. So we thought that didn't go terribly, but it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. And then we didn't hear from her for a few months. Then she emailed us out of the blue saying, hi guys, been working on this in the background. I think I can make it work. How does 250 stores sound? We're like, sounds pretty...
How many stores does Sainsbury's have in total?
So they've got around 600 like super stores, excluding locals.
Wow.
So it started at 250.
That's a big portion.
Big portion,
yeah. Were you expecting it to be anywhere near that if you did get it?
I'm not really sure what I was expecting. But yeah.
You're expecting I'll have one store down the road from my house, please.
Yes. And then a month before we launched, they increased it to 390 stores, which was quite significant increase.
How long do you have from them saying
we need to make some tequila quite
I was going to say, like how, because again, those might not know, like how many kind of bottles of tequila would that be for 250 stores?
So you work off a unit per store per week.
Fine.
So the first order is sort of 6, I think it was between 6 or 8 pallets, I can't remember.
Fine. Which is a couple of thousand bottles.
And there's 600 bottles on a pallet. So it is significant in the grand scheme of launching in the gross. I think it's a significant number.
Yeah.
And then they actually increased our store distribution in September to 450.
To 450. And how does that? Do you know why they increased it so quickly before you'd even launched? Is that because what you're doing online? What was do you know why the reason was?
I don't actually think I do know the reason.
Just like
yeah, I think they maybe they saw what the category was doing. They thought that because ultimately it could have been us, could have been any other tequila brand. It's a plus 30 quid tequila. How big a footprint do we want to give this brand to test it out to make sure that it works longer term?
Yeah. And then you're now in 450 stores.
Just under 450.
And that's from building brand and working with the supermarket, everything like that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And doing well in your first sort of 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. One thing you were saying before when you were kind of talking around what the value you bring to Sainsbury's is the idea that 50% had never of kind of online customers had never tried a tequila or hadn't entered the space yet. How did you do that? how did you manage to bring people into the space online? Was it purely just through like hard acquisitions and marketing content? How did you do it? Because I think a lot of people can't do that.
The honest answer is I don't know. And it's the most important question that we have as a business to answer.
I love the honesty.
So it's actually a bit of work that we're doing at the moment, some more qualitative insight work around our top D2C purchasers and top customers, buyers. Why is it, of all the tequila brands that you could choose, we're the one that you want to associate yourself with? And it's a very difficult question to answer. I think there's lots of different ways of answering that question, but the two things hold true for us. One is we've got a brand that speaks to a slightly more modern consumer's values, and I think that's just sort of tapped into like the consumer like consciousness a bit, and a serve that is similar to other ways of drinking other spirits that
is familiar, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, we don't know the actual answer to that question.
Yeah, because I mean, as a brand, it's a very powerful metric that other brands maybe don't even have. Yeah. So it's, I mean, yeah, do let me know how it happened.
Where did they come from, and then why?
Yeah.
Is the question.
Do you think it's because you probably had a high proportion of the market share online in the UK? In terms of like, you were just the one that was probably the most seen at that point?
Potentially, yes. I think, I don't know. That could be a reason. I think the category itself has grown, so people are buying their first bottle of tequila.
Yeah.
So there's probably more people doing that. So there's more opportunity for that number to be slightly higher than, say, 10 years ago.
Yeah. It's super interesting for sure. Working with the supermarkets, was there anything that you didn't foresee being kind of issues with working with them in terms of delivery and rate and anything like that? Was it all very much how you expected?
It was pretty much as we expected. I think we're part of a Future Brands program with Sainsbury's, which is an incubator where you get a lot of support and guidance.
Amazing.
So we joined that program, and they've been really supportive and helpful in terms of the brilliant basics, as we call them in grocery, and making sure that you get those right and sort of walk before you can run. So I think we've had a lot of support from the Sainsbury's side, which when you're a brand going into grocery for the first time is invaluable, because it's completely new territory for you. And
obviously the team is still quite small and lean, which is brilliant from a business perspective. I guess also you haven't, at this stage of winning Sainsbury's, you didn't have experience within your own team necessarily of working with Sainsbury's.
No, so there's only 3 of us at the moment, and none of us came from a drinks background before they worked at El Rayo.
Yeah.
So I think, we've done a pretty good job in terms of dealing with a grocer with a limited experience. I think we've lent on Sainsbury's. We've also lent on other brands in the drink space who've massively supported with any guidance or any questions.
Really?
It's a great thing about the drinks industry. It seems that there's always somebody there, like, willing to have a 30-minute conversation with you.
I feel like everyone's gone through the battle wounds in this space where they're like, I'll help you this time because I know how rough it is.
And then you pay it forward to the next person who comes and knocks on your door and asks for 30 minutes. So that's a really nice thing about the industry.
So nice.
It never changes.
So nice. Obviously, to get to the stage you're at by kind of this point and maybe where you are today, I imagine there's been, a need to raise capital and go through that process. And I know you have done. Can you kind of tell me a bit about what that journey's been like for you?
Yeah. So, we launched. We actually took on some VC money initially for the first couple of years, and then sort of came out of that and have done sort of 2 raises on the more open market. Actually,
why did you come out the VC?
Just closed one. We just felt that we wanted to take back a little bit more control of the business. Nothing super negative. Just, I guess, a founder sort of led decision.
And then since that you've been raising again?
Yes. So we've raised, we just closed a round a couple of days ago, so that's really exciting.
Massive congrats. Thank
you very much. It's a lot of work that goes into that, I'm not going to lie. So now it's a really exciting time for us.
Yeah.
Summer's around the corner. going to be hiring a much bigger team. First time we'll start looking at some international markets.
Yeah.
So it feels like, a really exciting time for the business. We've laid some great foundations, and I'm especially team-wise really excited to get some people in with some significant drinks experience that can really sort of supercharge what we're doing.
You don't have to talk to Jack every day. You can talk to someone else.
Yeah, basically.
Raising in today's market is a challenge for many people. Like, I think with everything that's been going on for the last 2 years, ever since the kind of economics started to go the wrong way, a lot of people are finding it very challenging to raise. But you guys have really succeeded there. What's been the secret from your side?
I think having clarity on the narrative of the business and the proposition and why this is the business to invest in. And I think ultimately keeping things quite simple strategically. We're 2 products, we're trying to get people to drink it in one way. It's a very simple idea behind the business that we're trying to get people who wouldn't normally drink tequila to drink tequila, and we're trying to add incremental value to the category. And I think having a simple narrative, understanding what are the case studies that you need to build beneath that narrative that are going to resonate with investors. And I think alongside that, we've been fortunate that the tequila category of all categories at the moment is a lot of noise about it. It's quite hot. So I think, we're quite simple strategically, which has helped us.
Do you feel like it's really around also proving kind of sell rate, and like, do you think you could raise what you have raised without doing the online piece and winning Sainsbury's? Are those all really key pillars?
They're massively important. So you need to show progression, and you need to show ultimately scale, particularly at the stage that we're getting at. So
really,
so making sure that you tick off the next grocery listing that you need, you're increasing distribution, all these things that ultimately ladder up to the business growing. They're all massively important.
I feel like a lot of brands in the F&B space always seem to be raising. It seems to be since kind of COVID, and maybe just before that, brands have to raise X million every single time to do it. From a consumer side, I imagine that people go, oh, it's to buy stock and it's to put into marketing. Is that really the reason why most brands will raise?
Yeah, I think you're raising to stock, overheads, and marketing are the other 3 big buckets of funding. I think particularly in the last couple of years, raising as little as you need for as long as possible tends to have been relatively good advice that we've been given.
Nice. And the tequila market as a whole is, you just mentioned just there that it's kind of growing, and we've already spoken about it briefly, but it really feels like the US is kind of obviously led the charge with the market itself. But how much is the tequila market growing in kind of UK and Europe?
There's a huge opportunity in the UK and Europe, and even outside of Europe, places, territories like Australia. I think we've seen a slight slowdown still in a massive industry and growing in the tequila category in America, but it's maybe slightly slowed down from where it once was. And I think that provides a challenge for us, because where a lot of the big brands were focusing all of their attention on America, we're starting to see that, particularly in the UK, a lot more competition, both with new brands launching, coming over from America, bigger brands spending more money on tequila. It's great being in a category that's doing really well and growing, but that also has its own challenges in terms of the level of competition that you come up against. I think for us, the bigger opportunity, or the more exciting opportunity, is maybe outside of America and going where tequila maybe isn't, and trying to do the same thing that we've been doing in the UK and attract a new consumer to tequila. And I think ultimately that makes us a more attractive proposition as a business than a business that's just getting sort of bread and butter tequila volume in the US.
A lot of celebs have seemed to dived into the world of tequila, being like Kendall Jenner, The Rock. George Clooney was the kind of first one, wasn't he? I think, from memory. Why are they all in tequila? There's probably just a simple reason from their perspective, but it seems like there's a big drive for celebrity endorsement directly in brands. Do you know why that is?
Not really. I think it's glamorous. I think Clooney did a really good job.
Yeah, because that was very public, wasn't it?
Yeah, and everyone's kind of worked in his slipstream. I think that it's a very American-led thing, and Mexico's proximity to America, obviously the popularity of tequila in the US has probably meant that of all the categories, if a celebrity's going to get involved, it's going to be the tequila category. It'll be interesting to see how that translates outside of America, because some of them have had phenomenal success, like Terramana, The Rock's Tequila, 818, Kendall Jenner's, within America, and actually how that sort of celebrity angle and proposition translates in the UK will be interesting.
What do you predict that to be like?
I don't know. I think in the UK it's probably slightly less of a celebrity endorsement is probably slightly less of a concern for consumers. It's less of a reason to buy. So it's probably less of a tick in their box. But at the same time, they've got a huge platform. They've got a lot of cash behind them. So they should do a very good job. It's just, I don't know whether they can hang the hat on the celebrity angle as much in the UK as you can in the US.
Yeah, I feel like the celebrity piece, even in the US, is really around kind of initial customer acquisition support, if that makes sense. Like, I really feel it does an amazing job to elevate brand equity, you know, outside of your space, like aviation gin for Ryan Reynolds, for example. Like, the new acquisition of that is really strong. However, the retention sort of customers seems to be where it kind of tails off. Like 818 is an example. They've got that standout bottle, which I've already seen in Selfridges or whatever. I feel like people will grab that because they're like, oh, this is Kendall Jenner's brand, I'm going to try it. But then the retention tails off because maybe there isn't enough done to support it. Do you see that, or do you think it's...
I don't know. I don't know if the retention falls off. I think 818 are selling...
yeah. I mean, no, for sure.
I think it's the same with any brand, to be honest with you. What it looks like and what you associate with the brand and the reasons to buy make you buy it for the first time before you've even tasted it.
Yeah.
It's got to taste good for you to buy it again. So I think retention is about quality as much as anything, I think.
Yeah. Outside of the kind of celebrity-driven brands, how do you guys look at kind of competition and the space at the moment? Do you think there's a lot of people entering it right now, or is it kind of staying with a group of you?
There's definitely more competition than when we first launched. I think there's a lot of regulatory challenges with tequila, so it's more difficult to set up a tequila brand, which we know.
From when you guys did it?
No, it's still the same, but I mean,
know how hard it is.
You can't do it that easily. So yeah, I think there is more competition, and I think more of the US focused brands are coming into the UK, so that has its challenges.
How do you feel that audiences are kind of looking at, I guess, full strength alcohol versus no and low? Actually spoken to Rowan from Quarter on this podcast, so I think you know a little bit. But kind of what do you guys make of that and the kind of consumer changes in no and low alcohol and how that's changing?
I think it's a really interesting space. I think there's obviously room for both, in my opinion. I think brands like Quarter are interesting. Desem's another one that's similar sort of proposition. I think more choice, like consumers are in an era where they have more choice than they've ever had.
Yeah.
And if you have a proposition that's going to add value to them, then there's a chance for success. And I think the no and low category has been a breath of fresh air, to be honest with you, for the drinks industry, and it's been really interesting to see the way in which it's developed. Yeah, it's probably getting to a time now where the initial buzz and newness of it has maybe died away slightly, and it's maybe going to move into more potentially more premium flavor led and potentially a bit more transparency around how products are being made and the interesting techniques that people are using.
Yeah. So the future, what does the future kind of hold for you guys? Obviously, as you mentioned, you've kind of closed the round and you're looking to grow the team. So is that for the rest of the year the big focus?
I think team's a big focus for this year. Getting we're hiring head of sales, head of marketing. Their head of marketing starting next week. Head of sales starting in a month or so. I think getting them into the business and getting them up to speed and having an impact as soon as possible is a big job.
How did you find that hiring process for those kind of roles for the first time?
It takes time. I think someone once told me that you hire slowly. And that's been very true. I think, especially when you're getting someone at that level, you need to be sure about it. It takes time to find the right candidates. So he's probably started November time, and then sort of made decisions in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
But also hiring both of them at the same time had its own challenges as well, rather than just focusing on one. But yeah, so to answer the original question, I think, team, getting those heads of in, getting a team beneath them, focusing a bit more on culture and values and what working at El Rayo means.
Yeah.
Moving from 3 to 10 or 12 people doesn't.
It's a big jump. From my perspective, it's a huge jump. Yeah. And I guess, like you say, you're outlining the culture, over the next 12 months, you're going from a very small, tight-knit culture, I'm sure, to quite something a lot bigger to kind of discover. So that's a huge challenge within itself. Definitely.
And I think that I'm really excited to have a full team. And I think me and Jack created the business, but the first 10 people we hire will make the business like for better or for worse. So making sure that we really focus on team this year, I think it's really important. I think it's the first year that we're going to start looking outside of the UK, so that will be an interesting new avenue to explore. And
where are you looking?
At the moment, we're just trying to figure it out. I think mainly in Europe, maybe test sort of 2 or 3 markets later in the year.
Is that because they're growing and stuff's happening there, or there's already a market there that you can dive into?
Yeah, a bit of both.
Nice.
So I think focusing on places where tequila is growing, but there's also spritz culture where we see the brand working from a design perspective.
Amazing. Very cool. I guess to round things up, the kind of last question we like to ask is what you believe it takes to build a brand like El Rayo, and how you've experienced building the brand as well.
Probably should have predicted that question. I think probably the 2 most important skills are, for our brand, creativity. I think we've had to come up with a creative brand to cut through a really crowded category. And I think for any founder, anyone setting up a business, resilience and doggedness, and making sure that you don't accept no for an answer or 10 no's for an answer or whatever it may be. So I think if I were to sum up the sort of 4 or 5 years that we've had, it would probably be around those 2 words.
Amazing. Well, look, thanks so much for the time today. It's been great to speak to you, and congrats, because for 4 or 5 years you guys have achieved a lot, and now where you are today, it looks like there's a small rocket ship in Tequila about to take off. So a massive congrats. Thanks so much for your time, and it's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll definitely catch up.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate it.
Cheers.